For today's story, we review some of the potential nominees for the U.S. Supreme Court with Justice Stephen Breyer's resignation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this legal education content, and today will be the day I earned that subscription. For today's story, we are looking at the future of the U.S. Supreme Court. Justice Stephen Breyer has announced his resignation from the bench. And of course, this poses a chance to present a new nominee. Now, Joe Biden has already announced he's only going to look at 7% of the U.S. population for potential candidates because he wants a black woman, which is 7% of the population. So immediately excluding 93% of the American population. But, you know, that's where we're sitting. I'd like to take note that, normally for an employer to explicitly say they are going to hire someone of a particular sex and particular race would violate the law. It would violate the Civil Rights Act. For an employer to explicitly say, I'm only going to hire someone of a particular race or a particular sex. But, it's a constitutionally required process, and Constitution beats statute, so I guess it's okay. Anywho, we have to figure out who our candidates are, so let's do that. Okay, so here are some list of potential nominees, courtesy of David Latt from Original Jurisdiction. So we're going to look at these names. These names all have been floated by other people. His odds obviously are his own. So let's take a look at who he says are the candidates, which, this is the names everyone's saying, and what the odds are. All right, first candidate, Judge Kenisha Brown Jackson, the 40% odds according to Mr. Latt. Aged 51, currently on the D.C. Court of Appeals. The D.C. Circuit is mostly thought of as the most important of the Court of Appeals. So it is obviously a huge go-to for any nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's not surprising that they're there. Harvard educated, both in an undergrad degree and JD, with clerkships from 3 people, including Justice Breyer, and ABA rates them well qualified. Not that I particularly care about the ABA's ratings. So yeah, that's your forerunner. Judge Jackson is widely viewed as a frontrunner. It's easy to see why. With standard credentials for a Supreme Court nominee, 2 Ivy League degrees, both of which from Harvard, multiple clerkships, including Supreme Court clerkship from Judge Breyer himself, and judicial experience, including serving on the prestigious D.C. Circuit and 8 years as a district judge before that. They're a relatively recent elevation to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, but, the 8 years as a district court isn't nothing. Second, Judge Jackson says she is in strong support for liberal and progressive circles, thanks to her background as a former public defender and rulings against the Trump administration. So she has some experience as a public defender, which is an interesting perspective because normally you see more of prosecutors, but she has experience as a public defender. She went through Senate confirmation to her current job as D.C. Court of Appeals last year. So when I say recent, I mean like last year recent. She won support from all 50 Democrats and 3 Republicans as well. Now, you can argue, of course, the Supreme Court is different, but the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals is the most prestigious Court of Appeals. Not necessarily the one I'd want to sit on if I had my druthers, incidentally, but it is normally thought of as the most powerful because they deal with most of the administrative law issues. So maybe I should want to sit on it because I could radically influence administrative law, perhaps for the better. Or maybe it would just frustrate the hell out of me because I'd be dealing with administrative law all the time. So not sure if that's a good thing or not for me. But yeah, it's thought of as the most important Court of Appeals for that reason, because they deal with so many of the administrative law cases. And of course, anyone who gets nominated to the D.C. Circuit, everyone thinks that they're a potential nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. So everyone has it kind of in the back of their mind. Judge Jackson hasn't done anything crazy on the D.C. Circuit, and perhaps not anything depending on your point of view. It is, so that's a very safe nominee. So 8 years experience as a district judge, double degrees from Harvard, experience clerking, kind of all your things. Only drawback maybe age 51. So who else do we got? This is Justice Leandra Kruger, justice because they're currently on the Supreme Court of California, So that would be the first that would be the first elevation from a state Supreme Court since O'Connor, who was Supreme Court Justice for Arizona. So this would be an elevation from the state Supreme Court, or a state Supreme Court, to a federal court, or to the federal U.S. Supreme Court, which hasn't happened in a while. Age 45, degrees from Harvard and Yale, clerkship from David Towle in the D.C. Circuit and John Paul Stevens. Of course, no vote from the Senate because they are a state-level judge, but state-level Supreme Court judge. So a standard resume, D.C. Circuit and Scottish clerkship, service in the U.S. Solicitor General's office, 7 years experience on the California Supreme Court. Of course, she's a little bit younger and likely to be a bit more moderate than Judge Jackson. We're sided with Republican appointees, but so maybe this is who we're hoping for. Some observers see them as intellectually stronger or more intellectually firepower as that. Of course, youth and moderation cut both ways. Judge Kruger is young enough she'd be viable for another 5 to 10 years, so she could be saved for a future vacancy, just as Barrett was saved. So that's a factor, I suppose, to be considered. The moderation might make her a little bit easier to confirm, but it's made the left a little bit cautious or even opposed to her if there's a nominee. So I suppose this is who we're hoping for in our dreams at this point. So, Judge Kruger is, your moderate candidate from the California Supreme Court. So things are going really, really well. Who else we got? Judge Michelle Childs, age 55. U.S. District Court for the District of South Carolina. Education is from South Florida and University of South Carolina, so not perhaps a more prestigious position or background, but that's okay. And she has her Senate history. She was just basically appointed on acclamation. She has a number of things working for her, including more of a decade experience, a working class non-Ivy background at a time when many are tired by dominance, and strong support from Clyburn, which is an ally of the president. They have weaknesses as well. At 55, she's an older nominee, and this administration favors youthful ones. And the non-Ivy pedigree could hurt her. People say they're tired of Harvard, Yale grads, but when it comes to doing, Harvard, Yale grads keep getting nominated and confirmed. The last non-Ivy nominee was Barrett, which of course is Notre Dame, which is no slouch either. And Notre Dame is a bit more intellectually prestigious, I think, than South Carolina. But I say that as a guy who came from South Carolina, not the University of South Carolina, of course, Clemson and Akron, but there's some differences there. So several Republicans would support this nominee. So Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott of South Carolina. So you got Tim Scott potentially supporting this nominee. So that is a huge deal as well. So, so there's that as a one. So who else we got? Candace Jackson Alkalimi, 5% odds, 42-43. She's a judge for the 7th Circuit since 2021. Princeton, Yale. She's 53-40. And like Judge Jackson, she has the advantage of going through the nomination and winning 53 votes. She has experience as a federal defender, which the left might like, and a law firm partner, which the right might like. She's also young. Her relative weight works against her. She graduated from law school in 2005. So she only graduated from law school 2 years before I did. And she's been a judge for less than 1 year. Yeah, this is not her time, I think. Kamala Harris, 5%. The biggest problem with Kamala Harris, of course, is how do you get her past the Senate? Does she have to vote for herself? Because one would presume it's going to be 50-50. I mean, you're going to get any Republican senators to vote for Harris to be Supreme Court Justice? What's she going to do? Break the tie in favor of herself? So her approval ratings are low, and she could fail upwards. She's a former attorney general of the biggest state, and she declared her to be, and Tom Goldstein declared her at one point to be the ideal nominee for Obama's second term. And the people love complaining about how the modern Supreme Court lacks justices with political experience. But as a practical matter, it's not happening. What happens if the Senate is tied? Even if she could break the tie for herself, which she probably can, the optics aren't great. So Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. That seems odd. And then, of course, everyone else at 10%. These judges include Judge Holly Thomas, a California state judge who was just confirmed in the Ninth Circuit. Judge Tiffany Cunningham, confirmed last year to the Federal Circuit. We don't have any nominees from the Federal Circuit. That would be interesting. Getting someone from the Federal Circuit onto the U.S. Supreme Court could be interesting because they are a subject matter court. Judge Leslie Gardner, federal trial judge. Judge Wilhelm Wright, a federal trial judge, and a favorite of Amy Klobuchar. And Justice Anita Earls of North Carolina. The buzz-generating lawyers are a leading litigator and academic superstar. Sherilyn Ifill, outgoing president of NAACP, and Professor Melissa Murphy, the Stokes Professor of Law at New York Law. But the Supreme Court nomination process loves predictability, and surprise nominees like Harriet Miers don't always go well. So you'd be shocked about any of them. So yeah, these are kind of your nominees. So I think this guy has it about right. I think this nominee for the DC from South Carolina is a bit of a dark horse, but has some support. And I think Judge Kruger is interesting, but I think your odds-on favorite has to be Jackson because they are only 51. You're only gaining like 5 years for Kruger, so you're not really losing anything. And you're getting a more reliable left-wing nomination. So you're looking at a 50-50 confirmation with Kamala Harris breaking the tie, and that's about that. So I think these odds are about right. So that brings us to the end of the discussion of potential Supreme Court nominees, handicapped by David Latt. These nominations seem about right, and the odds also seem about right. So I wouldn't be surprised at any of these names coming out. I think Judge Jackson is an odds-on favorite with 8 years of prior experience as a trial judge. Having just been confirmed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, though, perhaps a bit of a problem. The California judge is interesting and perhaps a more moderate pick. So perhaps we should count our blessings and hope for that, I guess. But yeah, I think your odds-on favorite has got to be Judge Jackson at this point. And we'll see how it develops. That brings us to the end of the discussion of this article. Thank you so much for being part of the Uncivil Law family. If you enjoyed this legal education content, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. We appreciate your continuing support. Until later, my friends.